Hey guys, how's it going? Neil from the Pentatonic Way. And today I want to talk to you a bit about music theory. Do you need to know it to play the guitar? The short answer is no, you don't. You don't need to know it. That being said, maybe you should learn it. I'm going to talk about it today, and you can decide for yourself if it's something you want to go down, a path. So what do I mean when I say you don't need to learn it? I don't think this is a hot take. I've heard Victor Wooten say this a lot, and I agree with him. Learning to play guitar is something you hear and something you can imitate, right? Music in general. Just like children do when they learn to speak. You know, like they might not get it right the first couple times, but slowly they learn to speak and put sentences together and thoughts and communicate their thoughts so that the listener can understand them and understand how they feel and what they want, you know, by expressing those thoughts, right? They don't need to know about sentence structure and adjectives and adverbs and dangling participles. Is that a thing? I don't know. I didn't really pay attention in grammar either, but I digress. You don't really need to learn it in order to get your point across, you know? That being said, I think that there are definitely some benefits to learning theory, music theory. And at the end, I'm going to tell you what those are. I want to kind of talk you through my learning experience from not knowing harmony to graduating Berklee and understanding everything about harmony and what that did to me. Irreversible damage. No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, some may say damage. Well, before we talk about theory and music theory, what I really think people want to learn and what they mean by theory, like when I've taught students and they ask me about it, and I kind of read between the lines and say, what are they really asking me? I think what they're asking is they want to learn music harmony, right? Because music theory is kind of like, to me, it seems like a big umbrella topic that includes rhythm, right? Dynamics, composition, like everything under the sun, as opposed to like harmony, which is the interaction between notes, right? Scales, chords, chord motion, everything like that. So I think that's something I kind of didn't know before I went to Berklee and took courses called like Harmony 1, Harmony 2, Harmony 3, and Harmony 4, where you learn all this stuff and you're like, oh, this is what I wanted to learn. Before that, I thought harmony was like, oh, you sing in harmony, or like Iron Maiden guitar parts that are like in harmony, like they're harmonizing, right? I was like, oh, that's harmony. But no, harmony is what I was actually looking to learn, and it might be what you're looking to learn too. So yeah, when I went to Berklee, and I have a list of notes here that I'm going to look at because there's a lot to it. Like you learn a lot about harmony. And I'm going to tell you a bunch of terms here, not to sound like, ooh, look at, I know all these words and stuff, but more so like you can know what these things are called and be able to look them up on your own or ask me questions about them, I guess, if you want. But when you first go to Berklee and you're in Harmony 1, and a lot of students already knew this stuff and tested out, but I did not. So I just went through all four of them. So they start you with scales, you know, like do, re, mi. And they teach you how, if you start on the sixth one of that, sixth degree, and go to the next octave, that's the minor. So that's your minor, and about the modes and stuff like that. And then you start getting into like the harmony of it, right? Where they say, okay, so if you start taking those scales and break them down, you're going to get triads, and that's like those are the diatonic chords, meaning those chords are from that one scale. And you can play with those all you want. There's certain ways to do that. And then if you use the minor scale, you have different, same triads, but they're in a different order and they have different functions. It's getting a little hot in here. I always get hot when I talk about harmony. So then we got into more seventh chords. If you add one more note to those triads, it's a seventh chord. Then if you keep adding notes, you have a ninth chord or an 11th chord or a 13th chord. So you start in all these notes, right? You started with a scale with like one single notes at a time. Then you had 3 notes at a time. Now you have 4, 5, 6 notes at a time, 7 sometimes. And then you look at diminished chords, augmented chords, so diminished scales, augmented scales. You look at different scales like harmonic minor, melodic minor, and then there's a bunch of chords that go along with those, like really weird chords like minor major 7 chords and Lydian flat 7 chords and the altered dominant. If you're into jazz, that's a huge one because that takes all the dominants that are like flat 9s and sharp 9s and sharp 11s and all that stuff, and you can play that scale over it, right? So it gets really hard to digest sonically if you're just a civilian or whatever, or if you're just like, I like rock and pop and country and funk. This stuff can get very dense sounding. But then we keep going, right? And then we start thinking about, all right, how do these flow, right? So now you're starting to learn about harmonic motion, like what chords go to what other chords, And then you go into harmonic rhythm, like when do the chords change? Like they change twice a bar, 4 times a bar, once every bar, and what effect that has on the music. And that's almost getting into the theory part of it, because it has to do with rhythm, right? So that kind of reaches out beyond harmony. But then you have, along with like harmonic motion, like one chord goes to this other chord, goes to another chord and another chord, and what effects that has on your emotions when you hear it and why they work well together. Then you start getting into like modulating, or resolutions, like why this chord resolves to that chord. Why you could replace the first chord with another chord and called a substitute dominant, and then that would, still resolve in a similar way because it shares notes. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but I want to show you, by the end of this, I have a point, right? So you have borrowed chords. You can borrow chords from other keys, from your parallel minor key or whatever. You get your flat 3s and your minor 4s, like your flat major 6s, all these things, like, and then, so once you get into all that, then you modulate keys, then you have chordal harmony. So that's like triads, but instead of being built in thirds, it's being built in fourths and seconds, or like you get this really cool sound that's kind of like these sort of, like sus chord sounding things, but they have no third. So you can get these really cool, very cool sounding chords that are very smooth sounding. Then you get into like 12-tone compositions, right? In modern composers, where it's like you use all 12 notes before you repeat another note. Like this is some weird rules you can use, and Stravinsky and all these things. Very dense music using all the notes. But they make it work, and they set up all these rules for themselves to make it work. And then by the end of harmony 4, right? We got through all 4 harmonies. They're talking about chord clusters and just like basically just laying on the piano, cling, and it would just be like all this dissonance, blah, 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 and like by the end of that course, I was like, this is silly, because through the 4 courses, you basically just told me that you can do anything you want, right? If you can just lay on a piano and call that a chord, and this is a composition, and people that do that are regarded as geniuses sometimes, then you can really do anything. You don't have to stick to diatonic chords. You can borrow from other chords. You can turn this chord into that chord and still make it work. All of it is fair play, right? As long as you can justify it. It's almost like art, right? You can tape a banana to a wall and say, this is art, and title it the right way. And people go, oh my God, that is art. Or this urinal on the wall and I wrote on it with the marker, that's art. Or I drip paint onto a canvas from a ladder. That's art. You're Jackson Pollock. You're super famous, right? So, or Andy Warhol, right? I painted a giant Kimball soup can. That's art. And that's the same with music. As long as you can justify it and it sounds good to you, I suppose it doesn't even have to sound good to you, as long as it elicits an emotion and you can justify it and say, oh, I did that because of this, and that's a chord cluster. I borrowed that from this other key. Sure. Like you can get away with whatever you want. So we get back to the beginning. Do you need to know music theory or harmony to play guitar? Not really, because you could, you just won't be able to justify it. Just pretend you know what you're doing. And you can be like, oh yeah, I learned that back in the day. It's a thing. Maybe they'll be able to get away with that. However, I mentioned how I'm going to tell you there's some benefits to it, because there is, all right? It's not all just, silly, do whatever you want. There are some definite benefits to it. First thing I want to say is that learning harmony, music harmony, once you know it, right? It can seem very confusing until you understand the entire thing, right? But that's it. They're not discovering new chords. They're not discovering new scales. It just is what it is. So once you know it, at least on a cursory level, like a high level, and be like, oh, okay, I understand that these exist and how they work, and I understand how this exists and how it works. You can always go back and dive deeper into those topics. You know what I mean? But as long as you know it, they're not going to be like, oh, we came up with an H chord, or like whatever. It's just not going to happen. So that's the good thing, is like, it's not endless. You can learn it and you'll be done, right? And then you can just use it and explore it and have fun with it. Another benefit of it, and one of my roommates, Pedro, when I was at Berkeley, told me this, and I'll never forget. He's like, well, harmony and stuff is just putting names to stuff that you do anyway, right? It's just naming sounds. And I was like, yeah. So it's like cataloging in your head, like, oh, this is from that, this is over here, kind of organizing it, rather than just like, oh, here, when I go from this fret to this fret, that's a weird sound, and I know that sound, but I can go, oh, that's the one chord to like the 3 major, or whatever, or to the flat 3 major. That's a very distinct sound, and I know what that is and where it's from. So now I can use that. If I'm like, oh, I want to have that sound, I know what it is. And another added benefit is that you can communicate with other players, right? It's okay if you're just in your head and you're writing a song and I want to make that sound, and you know what this is, that sound. But how do you explain that to someone else, and be like, oh, it's this, or whatever, without, you could say, oh, play this chord to that chord. But you could also say, play a flat 3 major, goes to the flat 3 major, then up to the 5th, and then blah, blah. Then you have this kind of shorthand, kind of, musician speak that you can kind of, ease the communication between you and other bandmates, right? So that's a benefit. And it's just cool to know it, but one thing that you shouldn't do, if you do learn it, and I see this a lot, is you shouldn't look down on others that don't know it, right? Like, you shouldn't be like superior or some sort of, I don't know. I don't know what the word is. You fill in your own word. You know what I'm talking about, where they're kind of like, ooh, I know this and you don't. Well, how unfortunate for you. What, I don't know. I don't know what they say. But what happened to me when I got out of college is everything I wrote, to my ears, sounded like Weather Channel music. You know, it was all like 2-5-1. Oh, and you know, it was all like that because I had that stink of Berkeley on me. I'm like, oh, everything has to follow the circle of fifths, and that's jazz, and that's the pinnacle of music, right? And like you have to do 2-5-1s all over the place and blah, blah, blah. And then what I ended up doing, which kind of brought me back to reality and to a love of music, really, was I got in with a bunch of guys in a band that had no idea what music was, or, you know, music theory, music harmony. They just played by ear, you know, and they rocked. They were really good. And to be able to put myself in that situation and have to interpret what they're doing, that was another benefit of harmony because I knew what they were doing. So they would play something, it would just be something they came up with that had a vibe to it. And I'd be like, oh, cool. All right, yeah, let's do that. And then I could write my part accordingly, you know? So that was the benefit. I wasn't like coming up with the initial idea. I was using my knowledge to like enhance their ideas and help them achieve their vision, you know, the best that I could, right? And then slowly I kind of broke out of that rut of everything is a 2-5, and I started to just, sometimes I would just throw my fingers down or something would come up and I'd be like, oh, that's a cool riff and a cool sound. And then I could reverse engineer it and be like, well, what is that? Oh, okay. And then I'd have ideas where to go next, you know? So it took me a while to shake that sort of Berkeley aroma, if you will. But yeah, I think that learning harmony is beneficial. You don't need to do it. All you need is 2 chords and the truth, as I think Lou Reed said. And that's true. That's true. You see it all the time. Very, very simple songs change the world, you know? So, but if you want to, you know, be the best musician you can be, it's an avenue you can go down. If that's what being the best musician you can be is understanding this art form to your utmost, then it might be something to check out. I know for me it is. I love to improvise, and my whole vibe, my whole jam is, you know, playing these pentatonics and trying to understand the neck using the pentatonics like exclusively for the most part. And then what I realize is by doing that, now the chord progression is the most important thing. This harmonic motion we talked about, what chords go to what chords, and how does that change the melody, because I'm changing the scales to the chords. So it's all about the chords, really, when you get down to it. Every melody is built on the chords. I mean, you can do it the other way, like if you have a melody in your head and then you can kind of, oh, what is that? You can find the chords underneath it. But yeah, it's all about the chords. And that's all about harmony. And that's part of theory. So, you know, that's my rant. Hopefully it helped. Hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you know harmony, theory, harmony? Do you want to know it? Yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think. We'll talk to you next time. All right, take care. Bye-bye.